You're listening to The Lisa Show.
I listen every day on my drive.
Guys, you rock.
Lisa always gets me to laugh.
You're our winner.
Yes.
Welcome back to The Lisa Show. I'm Lisa Valentine Clark.
I'm Richie T. Coming up this hour, are you applying for jobs? We're going to help you write a resume that stands out above the crowd.
Then, are you looking to invest? We're going to discuss an option that may be more reliable than the stock market.
The start of a week also makes you look around the job place and you're like,
oh, yeah.
Do I want to do this again? Maybe you're thinking, you know what? It's high time. I don't know that I can start another week working at this place, and you're going to need a good resume to get out of there. Writing a resume, usually not a very fun process. You stress over how it looks, what to include, how to get an employer's attention. So they're going to choose you over all the other applications that receive. So how can you simplify the resume writing process, create a resume that shows your best side, and then lands you the interview? We invited our friend Heather Austin, who is a career coach. She runs the website ProfessorAustin.com, and she's going to give us all the tips on how to write a great resume. Welcome, Heather.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
Excited to have you here. It's her first official radio interview, so glad to break you in here on The Lisa Show.
You're already nailing it. Congratulations.
You're so nice. Thank you.
The big thing, let's start there. People get overwhelmed with writing a resume. Speak to those people who are just going to be prone to get overwhelmed.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of candidates all over the world, actually, and that's one of their biggest challenges is where do I start?
Right.
And I like to tell them take it in bite-sized pieces, so don't try and tackle it all in one day. Now, if you're currently in a position that you just don't like and you're ready to run out the door, take your time with that process and take writing your resume one day at a time. If you can get it done within a couple of days, I think that's great. But don't try and tackle it all in one setting because it will just get really overwhelming.
So first step would be to just not make those rash decisions, as sometimes we're prone to do, where it's like, can't take it, I'm out.
Yeah. See ya later.
Breathe a little and be able to do it. But one thing that I know that overwhelms people is this is a piece of paper that has to symbolize you, right?
Yes.
They're not going to get anything more unless you get into the interview. So how do we make those things individual so that we can shine?
Yeah, so I like to tell my clients focus on their greatest accomplishments. So when a lot of times when we go in to write an interview, a lot of people will pick job descriptions, so things that they've done on a daily basis. So some of the tasks that they've completed. But that doesn't really tell an employer what you can do. So I always recommend focus on your greatest accomplishments and get those into a nice quantifiable statement on your resume that you can where you can showcase who you really are and what problems you can help the employer solve.
I'm an oversharer. I know a lot of people are.
Wait. Hang on. We'll get back to resumes in a minute. That is a hot take. You are an oversharer?
All right,
Richie. Move along.
And I was interested to find out that there's a debate among different career coaches about how long a resume should even be. So how long should it be?
Okay, well, Lisa, I'm also an oversharer.
I want to go. And then this one time in high school, I did this thing, and then in college, I did this thing. And do you want to know more about my favorite color? I mean, it can get ridiculous writing a resume.
And we want the employer to know all the awesome things we've done, so we feel like we need to put it all into the resume. So there's a good rule of thumb that I like to follow. If you have less than 5 years of work experience, you don't need any longer than a one-page resume. If you have more than 5 years of work experience, you can move into a 2-page resume, but you need to do it really strategically. So you can use other sections in there like professional memberships. You can start adding volunteer experience. You can add a special skills section. So I wouldn't go any longer than a 2-page resume. However, if you are in academia, so someone applying to be like an assistant professor, they would use what we'd call a CV or a curriculum vitae, where you can go a little bit more in detail and go into 3, maybe 4 pages. Academia loves that kind of stuff. But if you're applying for just a general job, no more than 2 pages if you have more than 5 years of work experience.
So you talked a little bit about the sections. What sections should we include? in a resume?
Such a good question. So I always recommend my clients to start with a professional summary. So professional summary is that very first block of text that pops up on the top of your resume. It's the very first thing hiring officials will look at when they are reviewing your resume. Now, one mistake that I see people make is instead of a professional summary, they use an objective statement. Well, an objective statement is something that we used like 10 years ago. When
What
writing.
is that?
Okay, so an objective statement is where you tell an employer what you want out of a position. Where a professional summary is you tell them what your greatest strengths are and how you can help them solve their biggest problems. So now you're gearing your professional summary to the employer.
It's interesting. I know on LinkedIn, you can just copy and paste your professional summary. Like they sort of have this algorithm for you that it's like, well, we know he does this and this and this. And I've actually seen that when I've sort of cross-referenced people's professional summaries to what their LinkedIn is. Like, wait a minute, you didn't write this at all. You are copying, pasting this. And I think the reason why is this is a daunting task to be able to put your entire self into that.
Yes.
The kind of guidelines for a professional summary for people that want to start off right. How do we phrase those things even?
Yes, such a good question. I would recommend pinpointing first the job that you want to apply for. So you need to know before you start this process, what are you even looking for? What types of positions are you going to apply for? And use keywords and keyword phrases that are used in the job posting in your resume, but also turn it into like accomplishment or achievement statements so that others can see what it is that you do so well.
So then do you suggest having a different resume for every job that you apply for?
You guys are full of so many awesome questions.
Thanks.
I do recommend tailoring your resume. However, I don't recommend having a resume for every position only because that gets really overwhelming. You almost want to have like a master copy of your resume. And if you're applying for a position that might have a few different keywords popping up in the job posting, maybe change a few things, but you want to keep it tailored, but don't overwhelm yourself with 4, 5, 6 different versions of your resume.
We're talking with Heather Austin, who runs the website ProfessorAustin.com, talking all about resumes. So here's a question that I have. Say, and this is not me, I'm just throwing this out there, that you were fired from a job, but you obviously want to include that you have had work experience at a particular place. Yeah. How do you phrase that within a resume?
Yeah, such a good question. So you don't necessarily even need to put on your resume that you were fired or let go. You'd basically exhibit that in the dates of your employment. Now, employment gaps, if you are taking some time to find a new position, they normally don't become a big issue unless you've been out of the workplace for longer than 6 months. So this is where your cover letter comes in really handy because you can address that in your cover letter or even some sort of email introducing yourself to a hiring official. You can address the situation.
So I was talking to a friend who had been out of work for about a little over a year and had a VP, experience in sales and in a very specific field. Wasn't able to find something, so was just basically doing manual labor for a year to kind of keep him afloat and that kind of stuff. So when he was applying for jobs, he didn't know how to put that on his resume and how to address that because it was like, well, and then for the last 9 months to a year, I was doing this basically just as I was applying for a lot of jobs. Yeah. How do you address that on a resume?
Yeah, I think you have to get really strategic. So again, this is where you're not just going to use your work experience as your highlights. You're going to use your professional summary. You can also look at using volunteer experience. I worked with an individual who she was doing charity work for a while, and she didn't think about even adding that to her resume. And so if you're doing some sort of volunteer experience, add that to your resume, add professional memberships and organizations that you might be a part of. So there's a lot of things that you can use to beef up your resume if you have a situation like that.
What are the biggest mistakes that people make?
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Yeah. So one of the
you should have seen the way her face just lit up.
Well, I review a lot of resumes every week. And the most common mistakes I see is a lot of individuals will have like some random email address that they've provided, like sallyloveskittens@gmail.com.
But Sally does love kittens. Why?
And I always recommend if you don't have a professional email address, preferably your first and your last name or some combination, go out and get one now. You can go to Gmail and just sign up for a new email address. The other thing I see is you don't necessarily need to include your entire mailing address anymore on resumes.
Oh.
So what I recommend instead is you can use like your city and your state, and then you can also use your LinkedIn URL. So you want to pop that at the top so that a hiring official can go and learn more about you on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's very specific. You work with so many different people in different fields. I'm sure you've seen it all.
Yes.
What are some things that you have noticed, trends maybe, that people are starting to do that you think, ooh, that's a good idea. I bet a lot of people don't know about it.
Yes. Okay. So I also have a lot of professional resume writing friends, and we're always back and forth about what can we include on a resume to really make it stand out.
Yeah.
One of the things that a lot of people don't know about is what we call a unique identifier. So a unique identifier is a statement that a candidate will put at the top of their resume that signals to a hiring official that this is the exact position that I want and these are my exact skills. It's almost like a piece of information that's above your professional summary, that's in bold. It might be a little bit larger, but it's called a unique identifier, and it's one thing that is it's making it easier for candidates to get in the door.
Oh, that's great. I had never heard of that. Let's talk about some specific situations too,
Yes.
like if you're what to do if you're trying to write a resume but you don't have very much work experience.
Yes. Okay. So I do work with a lot of individuals in this situation too. Now, this could be someone that is a recent graduate, or maybe they haven't graduated school yet, but they still want to get out there and get their feet wet. This could also apply for someone that is transitioning careers. So someone that
Switching fields entirely.
Yeah, they want to do something a little bit different. So one thing I recommend, and I'm going to go back to volunteer experience because it's been proven that 41% of employers value volunteer experience as much as they do paid work.
Oh.
So if you can get that on your resume, even if you don't have it right now, I recommend go and volunteer somewhere in the position or in the industry that you want to be in and get that on your resume, because that's going to show your willingness to learn and take initiative. So I would always recommend jumping in and getting your volunteer experience in. The other thing that I'd want to say for individuals that might have limited work experience is focus on your education. Your education and your training is going to be the backbone of your resume, especially if you are a recent graduate or about to graduate.
What if you are coming back from a long career break?
Yes. Okay. A lot of the same principles apply. So this could be a mom that maybe took time off to take care of her small children, and now they're back in school. Maybe it's someone that had to care for some aging parents. Maybe it's someone that had health concerns themselves. So one thing, again, I like to focus on is get inside of your professional summary what your biggest accomplishments are, what some of your strengths are, and focus again on that volunteer experience. Focus again on some of your special skills and some of the things that really will wow an employer, where they can say, oh, you had that time off. However, I can see that you've done this, this, and this in the past, and you have an initiative. Let's bring this one in for an interview.
So when you're preparing your resume, how far back do you need to go, or how far back is appropriate to go?
Such a good question. So you normally don't want to go back any further than 10 to 15 years. Now, there are some in the industry that will say 10 years and then cut it off. I'm okay going a little bit further than 10 years back, because you might say, hey, that job I had 10 years ago, that was really important. I know I've had some of those. But employers want to know what you're doing now. What experience do you have right now that's going to apply to that position?
So I'm thinking about the scene in a movie. I think it's like Legally Blonde or something like that, where it's like the resume is like has a special color, signature color, a scent even to make it stand out. It seems kind of ridiculous, but can you speak to really what makes your resume stand out, even in the design, even in the font that you choose, or the weight of paper?
Yes. So It depends on the industry. So I am a very, when it comes to writing resumes, I like to stick with a nice structured resume. In fact, one of the things I recommend for a lot of individuals is not to use like fancy formatting unless you're in the design industry. So I taught web and graphic design students for a lot of years, and they do more of like an infographic resume, which is okay for their industry. However, the problem that you run into is if you add too many fancy, like a table and columns and things like that, if your resume goes through an applicant tracking system, all that information's jumbled together. So applicant tracking systems are what employers use to keep track of, does this candidate match up to the job? So it's a way for them to screen out candidates really, really quickly. And if you are using tables and columns and weird formatting, it just means that it's jumbling that information together, and you may not even make it past the applicant tracking system. So I am a big believer of nice, simple formatting.
We have about a minute left.
Awesome.
Is there anything else that we should keep in mind when writing our resumes that we haven't talked about?
Yes. One last thing. So I want to tell everyone that's listening, you need to tap into your network. You have to tap into your network to really help you get your foot in the door. And what this means is reaching out to family members, reaching out to friends, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, and letting them know that you are looking for a job, letting them know what type of position you're looking for, and asking them if they know anyone that they can put you in touch with. Because if you can get in through a referral, chances of you getting an interview are a lot higher.
Well, thank you for joining us, Heather.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Heather Austin is a career coach who works one-on-one with clients to help them find a career that brings them happiness and fulfillment. You can find her at ProfessorAustin.com or on her YouTube channel, Professor Heather Austin. Now, coming up, are you preparing for retirement yet? We're going to talk about how investing in art could support you later in life. You're listening to The Lisa Show. We'll be right back.